All right. Okay. So yeah, if you can hear me already, if you're currently with us here, go ahead and drop a message in the chat so that we can kick off with the session. Drop a message in the chat if you can hear me, so that we can kick off with the session already. Drop a message in the chat, guys. Drop a message in the chat. All right, Amaka, I don't know if you have dropped a notification for some of the folks here. Can you hear me?
Notification already.
Okay. I think you are not. Yeah, I don't think I got that. Please, can you repeat yourself? What did you say?
I said yes, I have dropped the notification already.
Oh, okay, okay, good, good, good. Okay, so if you're currently in the chat, if you can, if you're currently seeing the stream, drop a message in the chat so that we can be sure, if we should start. Drop a message in the chat. Okay, so I can see Rukayat. Um, Hi, Rukayat. So I think we're still expecting some other folks to join us. Okay. Okay, so we're going to be looking at, we're actually looking at backend engineering right now. I don't think I'm not seeing the guys from Kenya join yet. Okay, so I can only see three people in the chat. So yeah, drop a message, guys. I can see. Okay, we have four people currently viewing from YouTube. Drop a message in the chat so that we can start. We're taking long already. Drop a message in the chat. If you are new to programming, if you're just starting out, and this is your first class, let me know by dropping a message in the chat. Okay. Guys, I said if you're just joining us for the first time, um, okay, you know what? Just drop a message in the chat. I want to know I want to know how many of us are following so that I can start, I can start off with the revision. Okay, so I think I have five people watching. I'll just go ahead and share what I'll be using for today's session. So basically, as I said earlier, it's going to be a revision, right? So I'm just going to share my screen right now and show you what we're going to be covering today. Okay, so I'm currently sharing my screen. I'm sure you guys can see it. Okay, so Eric, this is your first time. Okay, Cassie, welcome. All right, so if you can see my screen, I have this this collection of contents. So these are basically the previous classes, of course, taught by some of the instructors that made out some time to to teach you guys, right? So from some of the previous instructors, for example, this class was taken by Isaac Anane from Ghana. Am I correct on that? Yeah, I think from Ghana. Yeah. So we also what we've done basically is we've arranged all the classes into blog posts like this. So all you have to do is read through. You just have to read through on this blog content. Basically, follow the table of content, right? From the overview, history and development, history of a backend development with JavaScript, JavaScript fundamentals. Of course, we have some sample codes to explain everything here. I'm going to be taking it, today. Of course, I'm going to take it one step at a time. So we are going to cover a couple of these items. But the first thing we're going to do basically is to install some of the software that you'll be using. So I'm going to share a different screen and show you some of these tools that you'll be using while writing code. Okay. Okay. So I'll stop sharing for now, and I would go ahead and share my entire screen. All right, so I'm currently sharing my screen, and one of the first software we're going to be using. Of course, I believe most of us already have Chrome browser. So what we need next would be Visual Studio Code, because this is our recommended code editor. Of course, you can use TextMate, you can use Sublime Text, you can use Notepad++, depending on the option you've used before. But I'm going to give a little bit of detail on what you can use some of these softwares for. So the first thing I mentioned, of course, is your Chrome browser. Of course, you're going to be needing your browser. It's very important. And the second piece of software would be Visual Studio Code, right? And I said you can also use other options. So the first item here is our recommendation. But of course, you can use Sublime Text, right? You can use TextMate. You can use Atom. So we have a bunch of software solutions out there. I will show you how to download them. But yeah, so let's just stick to VS Code. Yeah, so these are the primary tools. The third one would be your terminal, but of course you already have CMD, right? I would also show you how to download a different alternative called Git Bash, so that when I'm working on my laptop and you see me run some commands, you would be able to run the same command, exactly the same command. Okay, so yeah. So basically, your browser, Visual Studio Code, and of course your terminal or your shell. But by default, if you're using a Windows machine, you already have CMD. You should probably you would want to download Git Bash. Um, yeah, if you're using a Linux machine or a MacBook, you already have your default terminal, which is what you're seeing right here. So I already have a terminal, which is exactly what I'm using, right? So you can obviously download or you can just download Git Bash. I think that would be a better option actually. All right, so let's look at how we can download some of these software that I've mentioned. Okay, so the first one would be your Chrome browser. So I'll just say Chrome download. I'll be zooming on this. Okay, so I just searched for Chrome download via google.com, and I have to click on the first link, the first link you're seeing here, which is Google Chrome, download the fast secure browser. So from Google, let's click on that. All right, so next you would want to click on download Chrome. Of course, I am currently using a MacBook, so if I click on this, it's going to download the option for Mac OS. But if you're using a Windows machine, of course, you just have to go to the same page and you will see for Windows, right? If you're using a Linux machine, depending on the distribution, you will definitely get some guides on how to install Chrome, or you probably have Chrome already if you're using a Linux machine. All right. Yeah, so I don't have to download this because that is what I'm currently using. If you're probably using Internet Explorer or definitely not Explorer, right? That was a joke. So if you're currently using Edge, your Edge browser, Microsoft Edge, you would want to click on download Chrome. Yeah, from the Chrome website. Of course, you can also use Edge, but since we'll be using Chrome for this session, I think it will be better if you use the same set of tools that we use. Okay. Now, the next solution or the next software you're going to be downloading would be Visual Studio Code. Now, mind you, we we actually have a software called Visual Studio. What we need is Visual Studio Code, not Visual Studio. So Visual Studio itself is the IDE, which is the integrated development environment for programming. But VS Code or Visual Studio Code is the text editor basically, right? Primarily for coding, but of course it's lightweight as compared to the IDE, which of course has more features. It has a bunch of things going on there. So we're going to be using VS Code because it's lightweight, and of course it supports extensions, and we would definitely need most of those extensions in the future. So go ahead and click on Visual Studio Code, which is the first link we're seeing here. Um, yeah, so when you click on that link, it's going to bring you down to this page. So of course you can just click on download, download the stable build basically. If I click on this, it's going to download the Mac version, right? But you would want to click on this drop down. If you are using Windows, you would want to click on this option, which is Windows 64. You just have to click on this, which is the stable version. If you're using Linux, probably if you're using an Ubuntu machine, you would want to select the first option, which is for Debian machines, Debian distribution, and RPM if you're probably using distribution such as Red Hat. Okay, so if you're using Windows, just click on this option. Right, visit the website, click on this option, and this will download the Windows version for you. All right, so when I clicked on that, it's going to start downloading automatically, but I have to cancel that because I am not using a Windows machine. Okay, so next, I said I was going to show you how to download Git Bash. So I'm just going to search for Git download for Windows. Of course, it's going to take me, of course, to the main website, right? So I should probably just click on Git download. So when I click on Git download, it brings me to the Git version control website. We are going to explain this in the future if you're just starting out. All I want you to do is click on Windows, right? Download for Windows, or you probably see this button here. Mine is saying download for Mac, but if you're using a Windows machine, yours will probably say download for Windows, okay? So go ahead and click on that to get the Windows version of this software. When you download the Windows version of this software, you should be able to after installation, right? So you just have to click on it, download it, and follow the prompts to install. When you're done with the installation, you can simply search for Bash, Bash, which is once you search for Bash, it will give you the option of Git Bash, right? And you can simply click on that. So when you see me run a command here, you can simply use Git Bash to also run similar command, right? Okay, but if you don't want to use Git Bash, you can also search for CMD via your start menu. So just go to the start menu and search for CMD, or you can search for PowerShell, right? So for Windows users, basically, you can search for CMD, CMD, or you can search for PowerShell on PowerShell. Okay, and you can use either of these options to follow up with me. Sometimes the code I run might not run on your laptop, but most of the time I think you should be able to figure out your way around that. Or you would have, of course, you would get assistance from the Discord community if you have any issues. Always be open to asking questions and communicating on the server so that you can have people assist you, especially if you're just starting out for the first time, so that we can hold your hand while going through the process together. All right, so these are the major software solutions you would need. I think the next thing that we should do right now is just go through the previous classes and take them one at a time just to cover up some of those things there. So let's do that together right now on this call. If you have any question while I proceed, please feel free to drop your question in the chat. I am currently looking at the chat, so I will definitely attend to you if there are any questions. All right. So the first thing here, introduction to backend. So we are basically going to try to make you understand what backend development is, right? And why backend development is also an interesting area to get into. If you already selected backend when you applied for the training, then I believe you have some basic idea what we're doing here. Before I talk about the programming language that we're going to be using, I just want to make you understand that when we talk about backend development, we're simply referring to building the application that is going to run behind the scene, right? Which means users will not be able to see that application running. They will not be able to interact with that application directly. But while they interact with the front end, which is the website or the web app, that web app is busy interacting with the application that you'll be working on as a backend engineer, right? So that application is primarily the backbone of your business solution that you have built, right? So it can be a business solution, of course. It can be a personal app or something, but when you have a backend, it means you have kind of like a powerhouse doing the main job behind the scene, and then you have the front end, which is the fun part that the users would interact with. All right. So the backend primarily handles the work of the logic, right? We call that the business logic. Um, yeah. So that is what your backend is when it comes to application or web development generally. Okay. All right. So I would actually advise you to read this because I don't want to dive into talking about history. I'll just give you a basic overview on why we prefer to use JavaScript for this training. Um, I think one thing I want you to understand is JavaScript itself is not Java, and it has nothing to do with Java. For those of you that might have heard of Java, Java is a programming language that is used for the backend. Of course, we have a bunch of languages. We have C++, we have Rust, we have Python, we have Perl, we have Ruby on Rails, we have Ruby, which is a language, and Ruby on Rails, the framework. So there are so many programming languages you can use on the backend. But we decided to go with JavaScript because it's easy, and it's of course easy to get started with, and it's dynamic, and of course very flexible for you to easily pick up concepts and learn faster. All right, so that is the major reason for going with JavaScript, right? But yeah, I mean, if you at any point in time, if you have any roadblocks, always ask the folks in the community on Discord. We have a lot of interesting people in the community that would assist you while you are learning. Okay, so always remember that. Now, JavaScript itself is a programming language that is dynamic, and by default JavaScript runs on the browser, right? JavaScript is not meant to run outside the browser. But at some point we had a tool called Node.js, right? And using Node.js, we're able to run JavaScript outside the browser. And of course, this was in 2009, as you can see right here. So we could actually begin to write JavaScript outside the browser. So basically use it on our laptop, and we run the JavaScript code using Node.js. So Node.js is an engine. It's a JavaScript engine that was primarily built on top of the Chrome V8. Primarily built to communicate with the Chrome V8 engine, of course. So it's basically a tool, right, that supports JavaScript. So when you write JavaScript, Node.js can automatically run JavaScript because it has the V8 engine, which is the Google Chrome browser engine built in. So it uses that to process the JavaScript, and it understands what you're writing, and then it can execute that on your laptop rather than on the browser. Okay, so it can execute that on the laptop. It can run on Linux servers. It can run on Windows. It can run on a Mac. Basically any operating system. So yeah, I think it's something I would definitely advise you read through on the history, and then we are just going to talk about the language itself, right? So when we talk about programming, if you're just starting out, programming is basically writing a bunch of code that should be able to perform a specific action, right? So of course you have some actions in mind. So when you're writing a program, the program should of course do something, right? You want your program to do something. You can say you want your program to sum a group of numbers. Maybe you want your program to add two numbers, right? 1 plus 1, 2, right? 4 plus 4, 8, just like that. You can actually write a program that can automate that. So all you have to do is put in the numbers, and it would, which means when I say put in the numbers, you're feeding in some data. So when you put in your data, the language is able to process what you want and give you the response. All right. Yeah. So let's talk about the language and we can probably start, showing you some examples. One of the first thing I would want you to really understand about programming is the concept of variables. Please remember to read up some of this. So I want you to understand the concept of variables in JavaScript. So when we talk about variables, we're basically referring to some sort of virtual space or virtual container, that can hold a value. So just to give you a more practical example, let's assume you have a container, maybe like a cup or something. Your cup can actually hold items, probably drink or water, right? So the cup in itself at that moment is, acting as a variable because it's basically going to hold a value, which is the drink, right? So whenever you see that cup, you probably refer to that as a cup of drink or a cup of water. So, we actually have something similar called variables when coding because right now you see we have an example. We say let first name equals John. So this can be referred to as the cup, and this can be referred to as the data or the content within the cup, right? So you have first name, which is basically a variable that we've created. First name. So whenever we see first name, it means we're referring to John. If we call first name or if we print first name, the value we get is John. So every variable, in most cases, would have a value, right? So we have a first name and then we have the value. If you create a variable without any value and you do not work with that variable throughout the process of that application, then I think you're just wasting that specific variable that you have created. You should probably have to delete that. So now we have let first name equals John. Then we have let last name equals Doe, and then we have let full name, right, which is a different variable. So now we have John saved in first name, and we have Doe saved in last name. And now we have created full name to be equals first name plus last name, right? The space here is just going to give you that, empty space so that by the time you print full name, it gives you a combination of first name and last name. And of course, I would like to, try this. I would like to try this, but you can actually try this straight from your browser, which is the fun part. You can actually try this straight from your browser. All you have to do is, right click on your browser, click on inspect. So when you click on inspect, you can basically just go straight to the console and, put in your code right here, and then you can print. Unfortunately, I think we probably, it says last name is not defined. So let's try to figure out the problem. Yeah, so of course, there's a tiny bit of problem here. This should be a small letter L, not capital letter L. I would love to zoom in on this so you can even see it better. So let me zoom in on this. Um, all right. So I'm going to clear this first. Okay, yeah, let's just proceed. So I have let first name equals John. Let last name equals Doe. So this was a simple error from the previous code I pasted. Of course, if you want to clear the whole thing, you can just click on this from your browser, right? And it clears the whole thing. If I paste this again, I can just make that correction. So, and next, I can simply say console.log full name. So this is basically saying I just want to print this, right, to the console. And of course, you see when I print this, we get John Doe, right, which is a combination of the first name and the last name, just like we've described here. We want the first name, then we need the space, right, which is the space you see in between here, and then last name, which is John Doe. So that was, of course, quite simple. So we have let first name equals John, let last name equals Doe, and let full name equals first name plus last name. All right. If you have any question around what I've explained so far, drop your question in the chat. Okay. I just need to check. All right. So I think if you're following me, drop a message in the chat. I want to know if you're following me so I can proceed. If you're following me on this one, drop a message in the chat so that I can proceed. Okay. Drop a message in the chat. I want to be sure you understand what I've explained so far. Okay, so someone is saying the screen is not visible on my side. That is weird because, please, is any other person having the same problem? Yeah, please let us know in the chat. If you are having the same problem, drop a message in the chat. I want to be sure that every other person can see my screen. Bonnie, please, probably you would have to leave the call and join again. I think you should do that. Leave and join again, okay? It's probably a network problem. So if any other person is having the same challenge, please let me know right away. But if you're following me and you understood what I've explained so far, drop a message in the chat. Let me proceed. Okay, so Cassie said it's okay from my end. All right, so let's proceed. Okay, so let's talk about some rules, some principles guiding how you would write your variables. So the thing is, so someone said I should zoom in. All right, so let's do that. Okay, so Eric, let me know if this is better, please. All right, good, good. Okay, so let's talk about some of the rules when naming your variables in JavaScript. Yeah, so we basically have rules and of course standards. There are different ways you could name your variables that are right, but it's a good idea to always follow the standard, which of course in JavaScript is the camel case. But I think I would want you to also understand some of these things. So when we talk about JavaScript variable names, you must ensure that the name starts with a letter, right, or an underscore or a dollar sign, but your name cannot start with a number. Neither can your variable contain a space. Okay. Um, yeah, and also your variable names are case sensitive, which means if you write maybe full name, let's assume F is in capital letter, and you write a full name again with F in small letter, they are two different things. All right, they are two different things. So you have to make sure that you're very sure of the specific case you are using. And I think it's a very good idea that your variable names are descriptive, which means when somebody sees your variable name, they should understand what that variable is going to hold. So for example, if you see what I have here, this is full name, right? It's possible to just call this X, let X equals John Doe, right? But it's not descriptive enough. So it's a good idea to make sure it is descriptive, at least to some extent, so that you don't have new people working with you and asking you all the time, what is X going to do here? What is I going to do there? Right? It's a good idea when you make sure it's descriptive, and it's better when you have the camel case, just like this one. Okay. All right. So some of the common mistakes to avoid when using variables in JavaScript. So the first one here is forgetting to declare a variable before using it. You must avoid those kind of mistakes. Reusing variable names without declaring them again. Overwriting or reassigning a variable unintentionally. Using inappropriate names for variables, of course, you should avoid this, and then not initializing a variable before using it. Yeah, so please make sure you avoid some of these mistakes, because it can actually lead to bugs. Of course, some bugs that you might find it difficult to even figure out where the problem is coming from. So please try to avoid some of those mistakes. And before I dive into talking about functions, I'm going to try out some of these things I have mentioned so far, in my code editor, so you see what we're talking about. I am going to first create a file. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'll call this backend class one. Okay, so let's make a new file, main.js. And I'm going to open this file in my code editor. So I told you that I'll be using unfortunately not on my desktop. I actually want to be on the desktop. I made the mistake of not creating that on my desktop. I would rather close this and move it away from my root directory, to my desktop. So let me do that right. Right, so this is backend class one. To move this to right, and yeah, where's my terminal? Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to open this with my code editor. So this should be mates backend class one. Okay. Yeah, so remember I said earlier that we're going to be using VS Code. Of course, that's what we're going to use. I want to first explain the environment in VS Code before I even start coding with VS Code. I want you to, understand some of the things there before we start coding with VS Code. So let me select this file first. I'm simply going to this first name. I'm going to use Don, and then I would say let last name equals do, and then we have let full name equals first name, which is what we have created already, plus last name. Now we are not putting the space in between because I want to show you what we'll get when we say console.log full name. Let's correct this. Remember, it is case sensitive. If I save this file from here, I'm going to simply say index. I think that was main. I have to first go into the backend class one. So I'm going to say node main.js, and we're going to see the answer to we're going to see what we're expected to print out. Let's try to check this. There was a mistake when I added this, so let's try that again. See what we get. All right, so now you see we have John Doe, but unfortunately we don't right. We don't have space in between, which is that space right here. So I would rather do this. And there's so many ways to do this, especially more recently using what we call string lib, which we'll learn very soon. So I just need to add that space. I have to save this file. All right. So if I run this again, you see we have John Doe, right? So now we have John Doe, and it is basically what you saw in the example. All right, so we've actually discussed variables, and you have seen how to create a very simple, set of variables. We'll get to the point where we'll talk about, operators and, how to perform arithmetic and mathematical, operations. But before we get there, let's just try to understand uh, what we mean when we say functions. So you see, we actually have something called JavaScript functions. So what exactly is JavaScript function? So I'm going to give you from the example. A function is basically a block of code, right? It's a block of code. You have multiple lines of code, or probably a single line, depending on what you want to do. But this code is going to be, put together in a single wrapper, and that code is going to perform a specific operation when you call the code, right? So you can actually create and call a function, right? You can create and call a function. So when you create a function, you have a bunch of operations happening, inside that function. When you call the function, it's going to execute the whole thing, and you get the results, right? So basically, depending on the kind of function you're creating, but of course, when you execute it, it's going to give you a result at the end of the day. We basically have two types of functions in JavaScript. The first one is the regular function, and the next is the arrow function. Of course, they have their differences, and I think I would actually suggest you, I would suggest you read this blog post so you can understand some of these things. But one thing you should understand is when you use the regular function, it has what we call the this operator, and also, or I would say the this keyword, not an operator, sorry, the this keyword, and also arguments. We call it argument, bindings. So when you use arrow function, it's basically does not have its own this keyword, which means if you actually use this, the this keyword within the arrow function, I'm going to refer when you use the arrow function, of course, you can also achieve something similar. And this is how you call the function. After you just have to call the name of uh, the second function, which is hello. So this is just an example. We'll get to work with functions, but just to make you understand some basic concepts. Yeah, so we also have scopes, the execution. I'm going to show you an example from our code right here, X, right, which is hello world, right? And this is a perfect way not to actually name your variable in real scenario when you have like you can use this hello world, right? And there's nothing special happening here. So, but use x outside of the function, not be able to access the value of x. Have x declared outside of the function. So now here and stops here. So the same way you have scopes when you're performing or when you're checking for some conditions, and we'll talk about that pretty much. So sure, we'll definitely talk about that. When you have a scope, you're basically looking at so everything you have in here is the scope. It can function, it can be a loop, it can be an if statement. It can basically be any you know global scope and the local scope would represent the scope of that specific function. But we also have something called the global scope, which is basically going to refer to the variables that can be accessed, anywhere in the program, right? So if you have any item in the global scope, you can always reach out and access the value of that, global item. Um, yeah. So that is basically the global scope. It's best to practice local scope as much as possible to avoid. Oh yeah, so it is best practice to use local scopes as much as possible to avoid naming conflicts and to also improve performance. So please try as much as possible to always make mistakes. Multiple I would advise to read this up. But yeah, so when it comes to some of the best practices, learn to use local scopes as much as possible to avoid naming conflicts. Avoid the use of global variables as much as possible to improve security and performance. Declaring variables at the beginning of the function or block of code to avoid what we call hoisting. But we'll talk about hoisting in the future. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. So using let and const instead of var. So learn to use let and const instead of using var to declare block scoped variables. Okay, so let's talk about between let's questions about what's the difference between let's var and const. I hope you guys can see my screen. I want to see the interaction here. Drop a message or drop an emoji, just to ensure that you guys are following through on what I'm saying. Drop a message or drop an emoji. I'm waiting for that actually, so please do that ASAP. Do that ASAP, okay? Drop a message in the chat. I'm looking at the chat, so please go ahead and drop a message in the chat. If I get one message, then I can proceed. Drop a message in the chat. All right. Okay. So I want to know how many people are actually streaming. How many people are watching from YouTube? Amaka, can you get the number? I want to know how many people are actually watching and learning from this. Okay, so but while you're doing that, let's proceed. So when we'll talk about the difference between let, var, and const. First of all, I want you to understand that when you're using const, it means you are creating a variable that cannot change, right? You're creating a variable, and when you initialize that variable and, of course, assign a value to the variable, you cannot come back and change the value, right? So it's going to be. Waka, please mute yourself. I think I heard you. Thank you. Yeah, I heard you. I actually saw the number. I mean, I was wondering, is it that you did not? I think maybe I'm having some network glitch on my end because the feedback is actually very slow. When I say drop in the chat, it's actually very slow. Anyway, yeah, so I was explaining that when you're using const, it means you're declaring a constant, right? It means when something is assigned to that specific variable, you cannot change it. You cannot change it, during execution of a program. You cannot, randomly change the value. It is meant to be fixed, right? So that is why it is a constant. And when we say when we use var, so var is actually an older way of declaring variables. And the thing about working with the var, working with var when you're declaring variables is that it is actually function scoped, which means that they can be used anywhere within the function that they are declared in, and they can be reassigned or redeclared, which is the problem. It's not very good to actually do that. So in most cases, we recommend people not to use var, but always stick to either let or const, right? When you work with let is actually the modern way of declaring variables, and it will basically have a block scope, which means that they can only be used within the block that they are declared in, right? If you call them outside of that block, you won't be able to use or reassign them, and yeah, and they cannot be redeclared. So I think it's a good practice to always stick to either using let or const. If you're using var, please just stop that. Try to use just let or const. Okay, so when we actually about in JavaScript, I think it's something very important that you need to understand. Like a function, call that function even before you get to the function, right? So just like what we have, we can the call already before we even call that function, right? So it's because yeah, you can actually declare your function and you'll make that call before you actually function. It's actually possible to do that. So, and it's referred to as hoisting. I think it's kind of like a behavior that was specifically in for JavaScript. Some other programming languages I have used before, you can't do this, right? You won't be able to do this. But I think this is, I mean, sometimes you make some mistakes and again, what was taught, uh, right? And yeah, so there's a conclusion here. We also have some resources. We have an assignment, but the assignment has expired already. So I don't think members should submit the assignment. Focus on the next assignments that you would get, right? Just focus on the next set of assignments that you would receive. Yeah, so I think that is it basically for this class. So I think you should actually, I mean, it's very you read up on this. I'll read every single thing here because we're not doing newscasting. But I hope you get my point. You read this structured everything in such a way that have access to the material itself. You can actually cover a lot, and of course, the videos are all code using a couple of a special uh, um, yeah, so I think using some keywords, right? You have like the four statements. You have statement. So please make sure you click on this, and so I just gave you a very simple overview, but OOP and promises, and we also have how to install and explore elements, and finally what we've done, right? So yeah, and of course, I mean npm actually comes predefined, pre-installed, but I think what you would learn from here is basically how to install packages and work with those packages at the end of the day. All right. So yeah, question Lua, the Penn family, Cassie, Eric, Bonnie. If you have any questions, I think I can probably just share this on the chat already. But this link will be shared with you by your respect. Even though you're on WhatsApp in your specific groups, make sure you're on Discord, as it is very important that. All right, so I just shared the link to this specific page on the chat. So please go ahead, click on the link, save the link. Um, yeah, if you have any questions, drop a question in the chat. I'll take them. It's already 15 minutes in. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat, please. I'll be waiting to take your questions for about 2 minutes, so or 3 minutes. Just go ahead and drop your questions. Please, let's do that fast. All right, so I'm still waiting. Drop your questions in the chat so that I can, okay? Let's be fast with that. All right, so I don't think we have any question. I'm not seeing any question coming in. Yeah, we also have a different session uh, by 6, by 6 p.m. West African time, but of course that should be 8 p.m. Kenyan time. So if you're joining us from Kenya, inform your friends and your guys in your WhatsApp group, and remind them of the class. For those of them that applied for the front end development track, let's try to learn and follow up with some of these classes so that you can start building and coding with us. We usually have coding sessions on Discord where we get to build stuff together, and it's fun, right? I believe it's fun. It's very fun actually, based on the feedback I have seen so far. So if you can cover this on time, I would definitely want you to join us in those sessions weekly, so that you can also learn from some of amazing folks, on that session, right? It's an open session. So whether you're doing design or content or backend, you can always show up and code with me. All right. So someone is asking, so that link is the one containing the notes of today's class. Yeah, it's containing the note of today's class, and the first link there contains the note of today's class, and then the second link and the third link down to the sixth link contains the notes of different classes, right? That we have covered already. So we want you guys to follow through and catch up on time so that you can join the next class. We have a backend class on Saturday. So we definitely would want you to be in that class with the other learners. So please try as much as possible to follow through on the contents on that particular link that was shared with you. It is very important. Derry said, I enjoyed the class. Thanks to our tutors. Thank you very much, Derry. We have even more. We did not really code today. We just wanted to make sure the new folks are able to, also follow up. And that's the idea. If you have any questions, reach out to me on Discord. I would assist you. Or you can also drop your question in your learning track. And, the guys there are definitely going to help you. Okay. So please do that. And if you're not on Discord, make sure you join Discord server. It is very important, right? So that you get to learn from amazing people, on the server. We have more than 3,500 people on that server. Make sure to join. right? So that you can learn and grow with others, while you're learning, right? And we'll also give you tips on how to, start talking about what you're learning every single day from now, so that by the time you start looking for internship roles or junior roles, it will definitely be easier for you to get into some of those roles, showing your track record of learning. So please, I'll see you on Discord. Have a wonderful evening. Till next time.